One of the most interesting games of E3 was one that we haven't even seen any gameplay of yet. I'm talking about Cyberpunk 2077, and there is so much hype for this game. It's been made by CD Projekt Red, who are known for producing the excellent Witcher series of games, and even if you don't like The Witcher, you can appreciate how good it is from a distance. There's a certain quality level that CD Projekt Red put into their games, and the voice acting and characters are especially always very good. On top of this, all of the DLC for The Witcher 3 has been free, and there's been a ton of content released post-launch. I can't say that I played much of The Witcher, mind you. It wasn't something that really jumped out at me as a game that I wanted to play, but Cyberpunk, that's a different story. A futuristic cyberpunk universe is something that's, well, it's just really cool, right? And with CD Projekt Red's history at making fantastic environments and story, it's definitely something that you stand up and pay attention to. Now, while the public didn't see any gameplay at E3, just an in-engine cinematic trailer that looked amazing, certain members of the press were shown around 50 minutes of gameplay behind the scenes, so we can definitely get a good idea of what to expect from the game, and I'm going to go through that now. As well as that, there were a few developer interviews that have already shed some light on the game, and one piece of information in particular is very interesting to me. Cyberpunk is a first-person game. That's right, unlike The Witcher, this game isn't experienced from a third-person perspective. And something important to note here, and they made a big point of this actually and mentioned it a lot, Cyberpunk is not an FPS game with RPG elements. Instead, they're saying that it's primarily an RPG game with additional FPS elements. And I believe what they mean by that is that it's an RPG first and foremost and a shooter second. From the gameplay that people experienced, the gunplay is said to be faster than Deus Ex but slower than Borderlands. Now, if you can somehow think that through in your brain, you can get a good feel for where it's at. Apparently, they want the first person perspective to feel more personal. Visually, the game looks amazing, at least that seems to be the general consensus, and the trailer that they showed at E3 looked great, but you can only really get a feel for the game when you play it, and the press that got hands-on with the game behind the scenes seemed to be very impressed, especially with the level of detail in the urban environments. There's also a full day and night cycle, so those city lights are going to shine bright and look epic in the night time. The game isn't meant to be set in our future either, it's more of an entirely separate timeline, and as such the future is heavily based around old themes. It's got a very 80s vibe to it, but that's not the only inspiration behind the game. The game takes place in a city called Night City, and it's meant to be set between LA and San Francisco, and is heavily inspired by both of those cities. So you play as a character called V, who is a hired mercenary, and when you begin, you can pick either a female or male character. Voice acting has been done for both. It's not just gender that you pick either, you can choose your looks and even your backstory. The class system in the game is a fluid one too, and that means that you won't pick a specific class at the beginning, but it's a fluid system as you progress through. The core classes are Netrunner, Techie and Solo, but you can combine them. In fact, your decisions in the game shape V as you play. The game will of course feature branching dialogue options, and the game itself isn't linear, and there are multiple ways to combat each situation when it comes to dialogue and fighting. Choice and consequence are apparently huge, and again, they want to emphasize that this is an RPG game first and foremost. For instance, you can de-escalate certain situations with dialogue alone without having to shoot anyone if you're lucky. While there are of course weapons for ranged combat in this game, there's plenty of melee combat to be had, and in fact we get to see one of the weapons in the teaser image with the woman sitting down here. They're called the Mantis Arm Blades. Melee combat is going to be pretty similar to The Witcher 3, or it at least will build upon those blocks. You can play the game with stealth in mind as well, but as of yet no real details on the stealth mechanics have been revealed. IGN did mention a sequence they played where they did a stealth takedown on an enemy and then jacked into them to get a schematic layout of a base that the player was trying to infiltrate. And when it comes to weapons, there are three branches: power weapons, which are heavy hitting, tech weapons, which can pass through cover, and smart weapons that can track. And did I mention that there's going to be vehicles too? Oh yes, it's been confirmed that you can ride motorcycles and cars, and while I don't think it's been officially confirmed, there are flying cars in the game trailers, so perhaps you'll be able to pilot those too. That could be amazing. It's starting to feel a bit Grand Theft Auto, isn't it? So when you're in a car, you can actually switch between first and third person perspective. Cutscenes will be in third person, as well as when you upgrade V, that will also be in third person. Obviously, you want to see what your character looks like as you're upgrading and making choices for them. The main story and side missions will in some way resemble that from The Witcher, so expect that to operate reasonably similar, the main difference being that this is a huge cyberpunk world, and while The Witcher was mostly flat, with Cyberpunk, verticality will play a much bigger part. You're not going to be able to go into every building in the game, but you will be able to venture into a lot of them. And some of these buildings that you can go in are called mega buildings, which have their own ecosystem. The city itself has 6 districts, each area is designed to feel different. And the demo that the press were able to play took place in an area called Watson, which is described as a fallen corporate giant, and it really sounds like you're going to have an amazing time just exploring the city in this game. So in terms of XP and progression, the game has 2 forms of XP. One is the core XP that you gain from doing the main missions, and then the street cred from doing side missions. This street cred will come into effect when you're trying to enter certain parts of the city. It also allows you to get new jobs as it opens up new vendors and fixers. In the cyberpunk world, fixers are like the brokers of the mercenary life. They are the ones that arrange for mercs to be brought in to solve problems, and doing side quests can get you special upgrades and unique body parts, and of course higher street cred is going to get you better side quests, so it all loops back around. Certain upgrades can also directly impact your game's user interface. For example, there were things like the subdermal grip, which increased V's gun damage and adds an ammo counter to the UI. The optical upgrade, on the other hand, allows V to zoom in and scan enemies and vehicles. And with this scan, you'll be able to identify weak spots. When it comes to damage, there are 4 different types: physical, thermal, EMP and chemical. There was even a robot spider that was mentioned, a dog-sized robot that follows V and fights alongside you. Sounds pretty freaky. Now during the demo you also got to see V's apartment that acts as your home base during the early part of the game, but apparently you can purchase additional locations to use as your home base down the line. They didn't want to go into any further detail about that just yet though. Other quickfire things I thought were interesting. Wall running is possibly a thing. The game is intended for mature audiences, so there will be nudity and sexual content and lots of violence. In fact, relationships have pretty much been confirmed and romancing dialogue options will be available. Traditional RPG consumables have been mentioned too. Now there will be no multiplayer at launch. CD Red want to focus entirely on the single player experience, that's fair enough. They haven't ruled out multiplayer down the line, and they have said that they've certainly researched multiplayer elements, but at launch it will be an entirely single player focused experience, and I'm all for that. Overall, I have to say that I'm very excited for Cyberpunk and the hype around it, even more so now that it's been confirmed as a first-person game. There's just something about the setting of a futuristic world that's entirely based around Cyberpunk and that 80s vibe that I just can't help be drawn to. We don't have a solid release date just yet, but sometime mid to late 2019 is likely. I for one cannot wait to get my hands on this game. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below guys. It is sounding like it's shaping up to be something pretty special. If you enjoyed the video, give me a like, that would be amazing, thank you. If you didn't like it, dislike it, no problem. If you want to see more, then subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.